and make this thing official. All right. So welcome everybody. This is the COVID relief live Q&A event. And I appreciate you joining us. And we're going to be talking about what are your options in dealing with the economic implications as a result of the loss of income or either low or no liquidity as a result of the coronavirus and the social distancing. And this will be tailored towards small mom and pop style businesses with an emphasis on real estate investors that have long-term rentals, real estate entrepreneurs like wholesalers and flippers, Airbnb hosts, or really any kind of small business owner that has a very small amount of employees, like like 10 or 5 or less, probably is where this kind of the niche of this presentation is about. And a lot of people will benefit as a result of the provisions, the funding that is now referred to as the CARE Act that was put into law on March 27th. We'll be focusing on what parts is likely to impact you the most. So let's just jump right into it. And real quickly, a disclaimer that I want to clarify what this is not. This is not legal, tax, or investment advice. I'm not an attorney. None of the co-hosts here are attorneys, tax advisors, or financial planners. And we are simply investors and are merely doing this presentation as a public service for people who are in similar shoes to us. Basically, I've distilled a lot of information into one place, basically from public sources, and trying to give you some resources to use. So let me repeat, this is not legal, tax, or investment advice, and you know it's not because you would not listen to us anyway. This is simply to educate you so you can ask your professionals informed questions, and hopefully there will be some entertainment factors along the way, so you can kind of enjoy the conversation. Otherwise, this could be a really dull and boring thing because this be a lot of knowledge dump. And one thing I also want to have a disclaimer about is that the rules on this particular situation with the coronavirus and the CARES Act that came afterwards in the U.S., everything is changing quickly. So the government put in a new law very recently, and the details are still being fleshed out. So you must be willing to be fluid and expect some uncertainty when working with the banks, the SBA, and your tax professionals. I know the tax folks, they are staying up around the clock studying this thing. It was 880 pages, and there's a lot to kind of unpack. So I feel like I need to hear or read something about 3 times that says the same thing, and then wait 3 days and then see the same thing 3 times again before I feel like it's really concrete. And even then I kind of wonder. So let me real quickly introduce ourselves. You don't already know us. My name is Paul David Thompson. I'm a full-time real estate investor, and my portfolio and business are in Little Rock, Arkansas. And I also provide consulting and run a mastermind for busy professionals who escape their day job by investing in real estate. I'm also joined tonight by my partners in crime here, Chris and Cody. So I'll let each of them do a quick introduction before we jump into it. Chris, do you mind going ahead?
Yep. Hey, what's going on, guys? Chris here. So I've done real estate for about 3 years now. Was working a full-time job at a corporation, and recently, in I guess the last 4 or 5 months, left to do real estate full-time, as real estate is my passion and I enjoy it. So I've been having a really good time, and this is, I believe, really relevant and impactful information, and just excited to share that with you guys. I invest with Cody and Paul here in Little Rock area. I'm the salesman on the team.
Thank you, Chris. Cody, you're up next.
Nice. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, my name is Cody, and I did come from the banking industry before jumping in full-time to real estate. Currently, me and Chris, we do have a portfolio here in Central Arkansas that we own and manage and operate. I'll focus on the marketing side of things with Paul and Chris here, and also just meet with other investors looking for a place to, park their capital.
Awesome. Thank you. So let's do some real quick housekeeping. I want to get to know who is on the call right now. So I want to jump into the meat of the content just in a second, but for real quickly, what the format of this is, I'm going to be talking about the information knowledge dump for about 30 minutes. I'm trying to get through as fast as I can, but there really is a lot of stuff to unpack, and it's really relevant to the people who are on here. And then we'll open up for questions about y'all's situation. You kind of have this dynamic Q&A deal. So go ahead and find the chat window in your Zoom client, and let us know what your name is, where you're from, what type of business that you're in, whether it be real estate or if you're a long-term buy and hold landlord type, real estate agent, you have Airbnbs, flips, wholesaling, or any other kind of small business. It doesn't matter. That's fine too. Let us know what you're doing and kind of what your questions are. And you can ask those questions in the chat as we're going along. And then if the questions are relevant to the topic that I'm covering at the moment, Cody and Chris will jump in and help clarify some of the nitpicky details of what I'm talking about. And as we're going along, Chris and Cody will also be paying attention to the chat while I'm talking and making notes of questions that we want to address at the end. So some of these questions will be better served jumping in at the end. So I'm not going to cover any specific questions about your situation during the presentation. Let me power through it, and then we'll cover those types of questions at the end, because I might answer your question as I'm going through it. I just want to get through it real quick. I also want to say this is not a political discussion on how the government is handling the situation. That can certainly be interesting at times, but this is really just like a public service of knowledge dump. I want to get something out to you guys to get done with this and have something actionable to take away from this. So I don't want to avoid the politics. And so refrain from that kind of stuff on the comments and the questions. That's not the place for it right now. I want to instead focus on what we can control. And that's what our personal actions are and what can you take away from this tonight. This will be a discussion on what we know and what your options are. And then as we have opinions, I'll say, well, this is my opinion, but I want to stay away from opinions and start, what's the data points? Because there's so much out there, it's hard to kind of make sense out of it. And all of this will be, there's a whole list of resources that I'm going to give you guys when I'm done with this presentation. So there will be a recording of this. I'm going to email you guys everything, all the resources that I use to kind of distill this down to one place. This is just the first few things I went through, and I got so kind of tied up with doing that I'm just going to send an email to all you guys so you know what it is you're going to use. You'll have a digital copy. So don't stress this right now. We'll jump right into the agenda right now. Okay, anything else, Cody or Chris, before I jump into it?
That is it. Looks like we got a lot of questions and comments coming in, so we'll get to those.
Good, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to open it up so I can see the chat as well over here. Okay, perfect. Okay, so the agenda, what we're going to be covering today, I think I went ahead one too far. There we go. So the agenda right here is that we're going to talk about a document that was written in about 2 weeks, and it's 880 pages. Not all of it is applicable to us, but a bunch of it is. So the 6 big points I'm going to cover tonight are the stimulus for individuals, unemployment. I'm not going to go into the real details of that. I'm not a payroll person. I don't really want to be a payroll person. So I'm going to kind of shy away from that, but I will talk about the unemployment as it applies to your potential tenants and to you personally. And the $350 billion allocated for the SBA backed loans, that's where we'll spend the majority of our time, and specifically the economic injury disaster loans, where I'm going to actually do a live presentation on my computer of me doing an application. It's obviously be fictitious and I won't submit it formally, but you can do it. If you have a few data points, you can do it in probably less than 10 minutes. So I'll show you how to do that so that you could apply for potentially $10,000 of forgivable grant tonight. Okay, and then the last 2 things is we'll cover some interesting provisions that have been updated for your IRA and your qualified retirement plans, and then some of the national laws that have come out about mortgage, evictions, and forbearances, and whether you can do foreclosures or not. Okay, so let's do it. Anything relevant, Cody or Chris, before I bounce on?
It's people from all over the place.
Good, like to hear that.
Yep, happy to have everyone.
Okay, so the CARES Act, Congress is the people referring to it as a stimulus plan, and I'm not sure that's really what I would call it. It's really a relief package, because of the result of what happened with the coronavirus. So it's called the CARES Act, which, does anybody know what that actually stands for? Can you memorize that? It's the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Securities Act. So it's the CARES Act. I guess the idea is that the government cares about you, so they're trying to help you. And it is the largest economic relief bill in U.S. history. Even the big deal from the crash and even since the stimulus that happened back in 2008. And it's at $2.2 trillion in support to individuals and businesses affected by the pandemic and the subsequent economic downturn because we can't go out to work. Many people are referring to it as the stimulus packages, and I don't suggest that. It's a relief. The government is creating money and pouring it into the economy, and they've spread it out into several different buckets along. And this graphic here kind of shows you what it is. NPR made a really kind of cool graphic here that shows that basically the air quote stimulus checks that we'll kind of refer to them as the checks to the individuals. That's what the 560 billion is. There's a big chunk there for big corporations like hotels and airlines and that sort of thing. And then what we'll spend the meat of our time on today is the amount allocated to small business, which is something that's pretty noteworthy because a lot of these stimulus packages or relief packages that come through, they usually are they leave out the small business player more times than not. And this is one of the, in fact, it is the biggest time the biggest allocation to the small businesses that's out there. And that really is the backbone of our U.S. economy when it comes to the labor force. And then there's a lot of stuff about state and local government we'll kind of gloss over. Public health, not so much. Education is interesting, that there's student loans. If you still have some, they could be put into forbearance if you want to. And there's just a lot of laws that change. So if you have a student loan right now, its interest just went to zero. As long as it's a federal student loan, its interest went to zero. And if you wish to, you can defer those payments until at least September 30th, but you do have to apply to do so. So if you have a current student loan, that's the only thing I'll talk about right now is just the student loans. I won't cover it anymore. You can go and apply for your federally backed student loan right now if you want to defer your payments. Otherwise, it's just interest free. Wait times on employment have been waived. That's kind of a per state thing. The federal government has given guidance that says basically states make it immediate and there's no waiting time on it. And they've adjusted the IRA withdrawal rules and some QRP, qualified loan programs for loans, which we'll get into later. And they waived required minimum distributions for 2020. There's a whole lot of stuff more. So that's kind of the CARES Act in a big nutshell. Let's get into the stimulus checks next. Okay, so I thought NPR created a really good diagram here that clarifies the amount of income that you'll get or based on your income, how much of a check that you'll get. So I won't go into the details here. You can probably go out and read it for yourselves. But if you were making as an individual $70,000 or less, you'll get a one-time cash payment of $1,200. Married couples would each receive a check of $2,400 if they make under $150,000. So a family of four making under $150,000 adjusted gross income and has two kids under or 16 or under would get $3,400. And the checks start to phase down from there, and they kind of disappeared completely for people making over $99,000 as an individual or couples making $198,000. And the cash payments are based either on your 2018 or 19 tax filing, whichever is the most recent one that's in. If you've already filed your 2019 taxes, they'll use that. People who receive Social Security benefits but don't file tax returns are still eligible. So, for example, my parents, they're over 65, they're getting Social Security benefits, they're still eligible as well. And they don't need to have file tax returns because some people who are on Social Security, they don't file taxes, but the federal government knows about them and they're also included. And their checks will be based on information provided by the Social Security Administration in that case. So that's kind of the stimulus checks to individuals in a nutshell. I don't want to spend too much time on that because of the checks that are coming or of that money that's asked there, you don't got to do a lot for this. It kind of comes to you without a lot of work, and the rules are fairly simple. So when will you get the checks? That's what everybody really cares about, is when will you get those checks? So for most Americans, nothing is required. The IRS will either use the direct deposit if you e-filed, or they'll send you a paper check. If your direct deposit isn't on file, you will have to wait longer. So the U.S. Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin said that he hopes to distribute rebate checks that were e-filed by as late as or as early as mid-April. So we shall see. I'm not sure the IRS agrees with that, that suggestion, but that's what the government's trying to get them to do. So they're having to go through. Imagine how many people are having to file through to figure out how much they qualify for and get those checks out. It's a lot of work. Taxpayers are receiving rebate checks may have to wait as long as 6 to 8 weeks or longer to receive a paper check, depending on how much they make. So I found this really kind of cool blurb from the Washington Post that said that they saw some internal IRS documentation that said that the paper checks would be going out as early as April 24th if they make less than $10,000. And then May 1st for 20, May 15th for 40,000, and then as long as September 11th for people who make higher. So basically, the people who make the least amount of money will get their checks first. Remember, the spirit behind this deal is to get money back in people's pockets who can't work. Okay, that covers when you get checks.
Hey, Paul, real quick on that one. Do you have to, in order to get it this year, do you have to already have filed your taxes for 2019, or do you just?
If you file 2018 taxes, then they'll use the information from 2018. So there is a kind of interesting situation. If your tax is changed significantly between 2018 and 19, it might affect whether or not you get a check or not. If you would have qualified for 2019 and end up not getting a check, then when you file your 2019 taxes in 2020, then you will get a credit on your tax. So you may not get a check now, but you will get the credit for it if you qualify for it as a result of your taxes in 2019.
Got it. Thank you.
You betcha.
No questions so far, Paul.
Okay.
So I guess just reiterate the fact that if you guys do have questions or want to kind of hear some opinions from us or what's going on, feel free to just drop them in the chat and we'll get to them.
Cool. All right. So here we go. Unemployment. So here's where it is really interesting with the CARES Act did. So there's about $250 billion estimated cost to change based on the number of people filing for unemployment. So far, I think there were like 6.6 million people last week that filed and 10 million people so far that have filed. So a lot of people have filed for unemployment. And this bill adds $600 per week from the federal government on top of whatever your base amount would be from your state. So each state kind of has their own policy, and there's a kind of a federal boost on top of that can last up to 4 months. So for example, if an out of work person is receiving the national average of about $340 per week for unemployment, under the new federal program, their take home pay would be $600 more, which is $904 per week, not per month, but per week. And what's also really cool about this is typically self-employed people and freelancers and contractors couldn't apply for this. They just didn't. That's not what that was for. This bill creates a new temporary pandemic unemployment payment. PUA, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, through the end of the year. It only lasts for this year, for those people who are out of work as a direct result of this public health emergency. So that's what this federal boost is this pandemic unemployment assistance. So I don't want to really go into this a whole lot because there's a lot of stuff to kind of unwind here, because I'm staying really high level with this because it'll really make your head spin. But what's cool about this is if you are a 1099 contractor or you're a gig employee, like an Uber driver, you're self-employed or employee, you may qualify for some really generous unemployment benefits of $600 from the federal level. And the feds expanded who qualifies as well to include part-time people who are seeking part-time work, Uber drivers. They vastly expanded the amount. So a lot of people will make more on unemployment than when they were working normally. So it's kind of an interesting incentive from the federal government. One part you can say it's just big government saying that, you know, we're giving you money. The other part is this is an incentive for people to stay home. The idea is that you want these people to be able to still pay their ongoing bills and have cash in their pockets without having to continue to, they have to go out to work is the idea. This is also retroactive back to January 27th. So people who work their way through the system will get a big first check. So plus $1,200 from the IRS per adult if they're under their certain income level. So basically your tenants potentially are going to have some cash in their pocket to be able to pay their bills. So it would be in our best our best interest to understand what these available options are and walk them through the system. And you can imagine that the system is going to be overwhelmed with volume. And so, but the money is there and it's coming. But it may take some patience and a lot of paperwork on their part in order to get some of the money in place to pay their bills.
Hey, how do we apply for this?
A good question. I will include in the in the resources that I send to you, there is a national page that you can go to that it has a explanation of how every state can apply, and basically you apply online. And it's a link that I've included in the resources.
Gotcha.
It's a big long URL that it wouldn't make sense to put on the screen, but I'll send it in the resources that you'll get tomorrow as a result of this presentation and all those resources I was talking about.
So what about for undocumented workers? What about
If
those
you
people?
don't have an EI or a SSN, you don't get it. Not eligible. Same for the stimulus checks. So you have to be a legitimate U.S. citizen with a social security number. So if you're a day laborer and you're non-qualified, there is no government assistance in place through the CARES Act. Okay. So I think this is important to be aware to share with your tenants, because there might be a time between now, April through May, where they're not getting their benefits yet, but they may be able to work their way through the system, finally get their application in, and then they may have access to a lot of money. So as a landlord, you may think about that as, okay, let them know that you know that they're getting money, one, and also be understanding that if they lost their job, they lost their job, and they're going through this probably painful process to get through the unemployment queue that I can't even imagine how long that is. I mean, 10 million people so far, and probably more to come. So what you do is you work with your tenants and then know that they'll be able to pay when they get a big chunk of cash, both from their stimulus and from their job they've been furloughed for or been laid off from. You can imagine there's going to be a ton of paperwork, but it goes back. So if they were laid off in early early March, then they will get unemployment for May going forward. And so that's probably as far as I'll go with the unemployment, because it's a pretty deep subject and it's certainly not my area of expertise. I think it's worth knowing that much, at least, to let your tenants who are unable to pay know that they potentially could go and get they could get more money by sitting at home and not and taking unemployment than if they were working for a while. That won't last forever. Okay, so let's move on to what I think is really the real interesting part about this. So it's the CARES Act. So this is kind of the 6 big items that are covered by the CARES Act, and we want to like zoom in on the Small Business Administration. We just covered unemployment. We kind of covered the individual directed payments. We're not going to talk about large company assistance or the healthcare industry, which are certainly important and relevant, but doesn't affect us directly. Small Business Administration assistance, I think, is going to be where we really get into some interesting stuff. So let's jump into it. All right. So there are two major loan programs as a result of this. So, and these are what you would call SBA small business relief programs. So the first one is the Paycheck Protection Program, and it's a loan that is potentially forgivable if you meet certain criteria for up to $10 million. On the other side, there's the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, which I've heard shortened to EIDL. And what's interesting about the EIDL program is that it is something that's been in place. It's a lever that the federal government has as a part of the SBA, but they're now applying it to all 50 states at once, which has never been done before. And you could receive a $10,000 cash advance. What they're claiming is within 3 days of applying for up to $2 million of the loan, you can get the $10,000 in 3 days. I've applied and I have not gotten the $10,000 yet. So it'd be interesting to kind of see if anybody on here has applied and gotten that as well, or we kind of keep tabs on it as the time goes. The 10,000, according to the government, the $10,000 advance does not need to be repaid under any circumstances. It is a grant as a part of this program, but is a first come, first served basis. So definitely pay attention on how to apply here in a few minutes when I show you how to do that. And this may be used to keep employees on payroll, to pay for sick leave, meet increased production costs due to supply chain disruptions, or pay business obligations like rents or mortgage payments or debts, utilities, etc. And so the decision is, well, which one do you pick? Well, you can apply for both, but what's interesting is you can't use the funds to pay for redundant expenses. So you can't dip into the well twice for the same expense. So for example, if you need capital to cover the cost of retaining employees, then the Paycheck Protection Program, which is much more generous and forgivable, might be right for you. So if you have payroll W-2 employees, it makes a lot more sense for you to do the Paycheck Protection Program. If you are a solopreneur, landlord type like what I am, then the EIDL program probably makes more sense for you. And also, if you have existing SBA loans for some reason, then there are some relief programs as associated with that aren't necessarily additional loans, but they can provide you some relief on current loans that you have with the SBA. So let's dig into the
So real quick here, Paul, it seems like this benefits both you as a landlord or just as an individual. It really depends on who you are on this webinar,
Right.
Whether you can provide this information to your tenant, or if it's just, helpful for you to apply.
If your tenants are contractors, they could potentially apply for the Paycheck Protection Program on April 10th is when they're eligible to apply, or the EIDL program. And for you, you might, as a landlord, just a true straight landlord that does nothing but passive rental income, then the EIDL program tends to make more sense. I don't know if you could apply and get through the Paycheck Protection Program because you don't have employees. Now, if you are running like a wholesaling business and you're doing it by yourself and you are your only employee, then you still could apply for the Paycheck Protection Program. We'll kind of get into that a little more detail here in the next few slides. Okay.
And I just want to add something real quick here.
Go ahead.
If you're wanting to apply to both of them, I do believe you have to do the EIDL before you do the Paycheck Protection Program.
Yeah. Well, the EIDL is easier, so you can do that immediately. As soon as you get off this webinar, you can do it. Then you can, and what I didn't say is the Paycheck Protection Program, you have to go through a bank to apply. Whereas with the EIDL program, we're going to go through the SBA's portal. I'm going to show you exactly how to do that here in a second. So the first time you were able to apply formally for the Paycheck Protection Program was on April 3rd. And so it's now live. And in this screenshot here, I have shown you the first page it's actually only like 4 or 5 pages of the Paycheck Protection Program. And this is the first page. So basically you're going to use what your average monthly payroll was and then multiply that times your 2.5, the number 2.5 plus any sort of EIDL advance that you got. So if you got 10 grand EIDL advance, then you would deduct that from your payroll your payroll, and then that would be the amount that you're eligible for this loan. So this form kind of walks you through how to calculate, how to figure out how much you'll apply for. And there's a couple.
Hey,
Go ahead.
Is there any specific documentation that's needed for this?
Yes, there's quite a bit. So let me get into that. Because I have a specific. So you'll log in. You'll need the date you started your business. You can find the information by doing a database search on the SOS or the Secretary of State for your state, and then you need detailed information to calculate whatever your average monthly payroll costs are. So your QuickBooks information, which you'll need, and that'll be your payroll information that you would normally have to do your taxes, is what you need to do this. And then you'll need your annual revenue and have the past 2 years of revenue just to be safe, because you want to show like a baseline of what you've been, of what your payroll has been. And then you'll also need to know your business mailing address. So you'll know that. And then the banks may require you to have over and above that. So this is what the federal government has said you need. The banks may require more. So it's kind of on a per bank basis. And as of right now, the banks are completely overwhelmed. So do not expect this to be fast to go through the Paycheck Protection Program application. I have not done it yet. I've talked to 2 of my banks about that, and one bank said, "Well, we're going to wait to figure out what the process is," and the other one, I haven't heard back from, and that was as of Friday, just yesterday. In this case.
Hey, and also, what if you have like 3 LLCs? Like in my case, I may have a personal LLC to my name, or I may have a partnership with somebody else.
Sure. If you had payroll on all of them, then it would make sense. And I'm in a similar spot. I have several LLCs. So I have an active LLC that I do for flips and wholesales and consulting. And that business I'm doing the Paycheck Protection Program on because I am the employee that I'm protecting the paycheck for. But for the other LLCs, those are just passive rental income. That's not a business really. It's not a trader business. It's just a passive business. And that's what I'm doing the idle for.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I would like to make a comment. You made a very interesting point, Paul, that a distinction to make here is that if you are self-employed and you are the one receiving the paycheck, you can apply for this as to receive the paycheck for yourself.
Right. And the information that I'm going to send you tomorrow that has probably like 10 or 12 links, one of them will be the SBA Find a Lender for your state program. But you will have a much better result working with an existing lender that you've already worked with, that you have a credit card with, that you have a business checking account with, or you have an existing loan with. That will work out better for you, I think. So I've checked here locally, and I didn't even know to think about if my banks, did SBA lending until now. So I went and checked the banks that I've used before, that I have loans with, and some of them are SBA lenders, and so that's who I'm reaching out to first. And then in addition, there will be a template form, which is what I have here on the screen here. And then the U.S. Chamber of Commerce also has an exceptional guide that walks you through how to calculate the loan. It's like an online tool. And then there's also like a 31-page official FAQ that you can read. I mean, it's like reading the bill almost. It's kind of boring, but it covers every different nuance and has specific cases that how it would apply to you and if you fit in that situation. And go ahead. I was
gonna say I have a question. If I have a payroll of, let's say, 10 VAs that are in the Philippines, can I apply for?
Nope.
Can I apply and get relief for that?
Nope. They have to be U.S. citizens.
Gotcha.
Yep. And this is to stimulate the U.S. economy, not in legal residents of the U.S., not everybody else. And so independent contractors can apply on April 10th. So you got to wait another week for contractors. And so it'll be up to $10 million. The interest rate will be 1%. They keep changing what that number is, and you got to pay it back within 2 years. And so the idea of it is to provide cash flow assistance through 100% federally guaranteed loans. And what's really cool about this is if you can document what you're spending it on, and it's qualified payroll protection, qualified expenses, like rent and utilities and leases to keep the operation going, that is 100% forgivable. You have to prove it, and how you're going to prove it, and when and how they officially tell you that it's not. It becomes a grant, not a loan. We don't know yet. It's too early for that. Right now, it's just get in line. Go find your bank that you do business with. Hopefully, you are doing business with one. If you don't do business with one right now, I think it's going to be a long wait, because the banks are only working with people right now that they have existing business relationships with. I'm sure that will adjust over time, but I believe the application has to be in by June 30th. So there's going to be kind of a narrow window of time to apply. But I mean, this is the second day of the program as of today on Saturday, March 4th. So there's a lot to be figured out yet. Trying to see here in my notes if there's anything else, like who qualifies. I don't want to get into all that. Basically, if you're an active business concern that it's in real estate or has a consulting business or something, it makes sense. There's a bunch of exceptions for like nonprofit organizations and tribal businesses. I don't want to get into all that. You can go read about that if you have an unusual situation. I talked about how the loan size is determined. So the compensation that's eligible for payroll are salary, wages, commissions, tips. Like that you actually have a way of like estimating how much tips your waitresses, whatnot, waiters or wait staff would have. There's a whole host of benefits that are like vacation leave, group health costs. And if you have a good sized business that has lots of employees, then there's also some credits that you can get from an unrelated act that was put into place that may have some overlap. So that would be where you definitely want to talk to a tax accountant and make sure you're doing the best choice, whether it's the tax credits or these loans that turn into grants. Oh, and here's an important that if you this applies to real estate investors. If you have contractors that you work with, the 1099s, you don't count them as your employees. You don't count them as your payroll. They can go apply for this themselves, and they would account for their income on their side. So they changed the rule to avoid you and your contractor both applying for the same credit, basically. So if you are a sole proprietor and have no employees, you still may qualify for starting on April 10th. I think that covers the highlights anyway. The term, you got to pay it back in 2 years. If a part that stays alone, you got to pay it back in 2 years. And you can have both a PPP and EIDL loan so long as they are used for the same costs. Okay. Ready to move on to EIDL?
Let's do it. A lot of people are just curious of how to apply, but I think
I want to get my 10 grand. All right, so that's what we're gonna do right now. So let me talk about the EIDL real quick, and then we'll actually go to the screenshot I have on the right here. I'll actually go to that and show you how to apply. So you are allowed to apply to both programs, but there are restrictions. These grants provide an emergency of up to $10,000 for small business and non-private, but you have to have been harmed by the COVID-19. And there's a link that I'll show you here how to get there. It's super easy. It's disasterloan.sba.gov. And its intent is to pay for payroll, sick leave, meet increased production costs due to supply chain disruptions, any kind of debt payments you have, rent, mortgage payments, that kind of thing. And you're eligible for up to $2 million. I think in our case, most of us went there. The way you qualify for an SBC loan or SBA loan is that they look at your cash flow. So you need to have your books in order, and you have to share a lot of documentation with them after you apply. And then they will, at some point, I'm not sure if it'll be, 2 weeks or 2 years or 2 months before they get to you. But once they get to you, they will basically determine how much of you're eligible for, and usually they use like a 6-month window of this is how much working capital that you have, and you can get a loan for working capital because this is the kind of cash flows that you had in the past. The interest rate is 3.75%. And depending, and this is an actual loan except for that first $10,000. Most of this is not turned into a grant. The grant is for the Paycheck Protection Program. And you apply for this through the SBA and not through a third-party bank, which is what the Paycheck Protection Program does. And who's eligible? Practically everybody. I mean, there's a couple of little like casinos and racetracks and gamblings. Religious organizations aren't eligible. But if you're a normal kind of run-the-mill business, you are eligible for this. And there is no cost to apply. You do not have to take the loan if you don't want it. It's amortized for up to 30 years. But your business must have been in operation by January 31st of 2020 to be eligible. And there is a section for lost rents. So, I mean, they are thinking about rental. I mean, normally the SBA does not serve cash flow property investors. That's not their typical thing. Well, right now there's like a specific deal that says that it's for lost rents. And so it very much applies to real estate investors. So let's just
Hey, Paul, real quick. People that live out of country, can they still apply for the EIDL, even if they have rental property here in the U.S.?
He lives in Puerto Rico, but his rentals are in Memphis, and you're organized in Tennessee, I assume. That's a good question. Well,
I would assume if he has a social security or an EIN number, that's really what they're looking for.
And Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, so that would apply. But I'm trying to think if you lived, in a different country. I don't know. It's a good question. Let's jump into the screen share.
Yeah, I would double check, but I think they're just looking for that EIN number or tax ID.
Okay, let me know if you guys can see this.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah, we can.
All right, so the link is, I think Chris put it in there, disasterloansba.gov. Yeah. And then I'm going to move this out of the way. Then you can apply for assistance. And then to apply for COVID-19 economic injury disaster loan, click here. And it loads this application, which is just like what I showed you a second ago. And let's just power through this thing. I mean, it is, once you know how to do it, it's fast. So first off, there's a couple of choices. Who is going to apply? What type of entity are you? I think most of us will fall into either one of these two. You're either an individual who operates a sole proprietor, or you're in a business that's 500 or less. So let's choose this one. And you review and check all the following. Basically, are you not you don't owe things? You're not in the lobbying business. Ownership
pretty much apply, really.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna have to read through these and do it yourself. But if any of these apply to you, then you're not eligible. But you're not a member of Congress. These like, you're not delinquent on if you're delinquent on child support obligations. Click continue, and then we're just gonna make up a fake name. Main Street. EIN, so you'll just type in your EIN here.
So pretty much they're really just going down that screen by screen, step by step to just fill it out.
Yep. And you're either a sole prop
or
you're either a sole prop or a deal. So you just actually, I mean, obviously you put in your own EIN here for your particular business. And then are you a nonprofit? No. Are you a franchise? No. Your gross revenues, I'm just going to make this up. Let's say $100,000. This is your top line revenue, gross revenue, and your costs. So however much it costs to run your business, on an annual basis between January 31st, 2020, or February 1st, 2019, and January 31st, January 31. So I just went to my QuickBooks and did a report for that date and just pulled my top line revenue and then pulled my cost of goods there, including my mortgage payments. So it's like a cash flow deal, like how much money came in and how much money went out. That's the two numbers I used. And then here's the tricky part for rental properties. You've lost rents due to the disaster. So we don't know yet. But if you don't apply now, if you wait for 3 months and apply, the money's going to be gone. So what I did is I just assumed that 25% of my tenants aren't going to be able to pay because there's like nearly 25% unemployment rate, and it's going to happen for the next 3 months. So run your numbers based on that, and let's say that was $10,000. And the rest of these are for nonprofit that don't apply to us. And obviously these numbers up here, they're your numbers. Don't use my numbers. This is fictitious. Go and pull your real numbers. And the rest of this is, are you faith-based? No. Competition from other places? No. Private description of other sources? Not necessary. And then I just put in my address. Main Street. In my case, Little Rock, Arkansas. Zip. Business phone number.
Paul, is there any way to go back and do this if you've already submitted it and you kind of enter in some things wrong?
That's a good question. I have no idea. I
Might just have to go back and try.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would apply twice. You've applied. There will be somebody contact you eventually, and they will have much more better idea of what they want, and you can make adjustments. That's what I would do. So you put in your email address.
Paul, while you're doing that, Charles had a question. What if you made $0 in 2019 because you just started your business? I think it's looking for up till January 20 or 31 of 2020. So if you made any money up until that point, and I would assume that's what you put in.
Yeah, I don't know if you can apply if you didn't make any money. You didn't make any money, but you did have an existing business before the due date. I would apply anyway.
Let's try it out and see. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to take the money. I mean, if you don't want it or you don't qualify. So the business activity, I'm not doing this right here. 1970. Okay. So I'm choosing real estate. That's the business I'm in. You guys obviously pick the one that's applicable for you. And then I'm not in project management and I'm not a developer, so I did none of the above. Number of employees, 0. Next. So I'm just going to kind of plow through this, guys. All right. You got to, whatever, doesn't matter. So you're the CEO, ownership interest. So if you own 100%, it's easy. If you own like 50-50, then you're going to have to apply it. You're going to have to add an additional owner, which is down below. You put in your email. And you put in your personal social as this owner agent. You put in your birth date. Oh, I'm old. Dang. Place of birth. I mean, I'm not sure why it matters, but put in wherever you're born.
970, huh?
Yeah. Oh, I'm still old. Here we go. There we go. U.S. citizen. Yes, I'm a U.S. citizen. You need to be. Residential address. Whatever, Main Street.
Could you claim properties that you've already rehabbed as lost rents?
So like a property that you have listed and maybe you have holding costs, or I think that, Jeff, does that clarify your question? If you completed a rehab now, okay.
What was your intention is what I would go back to. If your intention was to hold it as a flip and it's in your like flipper business, then I would not include it. But you can ultimately ask the SBA person that talks to you and tell them your situation. I mean, they're going to ask for more information. This is not going to be it. This is just to get you started, get it in there. and then you can ask them, I have other properties that I'm going to have to convert over to rentals because they're not selling because the market's turned down. I mean, you can make an argument for that, but I don't know. I haven't talked to anybody that said one way or the other.
It's to my understanding
That's a
that
good
it's first
question.
come, first serve, right? So
It is. So get these
kinda
things,
get it
applications in. Exactly. Yeah. And so if you have additional owners, you hit that. I've missed something along the way. Is your business owned by a business entity? No. If it is, you got to add it. Okay, next. And additional information in the past year as a business or listed been convicted of a criminal. So no. Yeah, no. So obviously answer these for your situation. And if you hired somebody, this blue section, if you hired somebody to fill this out for you, you'd put this out here. I didn't, so I'm just going to say no and not fill it out. And here's the awesome part. I would like to be considered for an advance of $10,000. Yes, as a matter of fact, I would. According to the government, under no circumstances will this money be paid back. It is, if you apply and get denied, they still send you 10 grand. That's the way everybody was reading it. There's $10 billion allocated for this. So put your stuff in there. So put in whatever your bank is, whatever your routing number is. I have no idea. And that's it. You read this super carefully. Cannot stress this enough. Do not lie on applications. Read this, make sure everything you're saying is right, to the best of your ability, and then hereby say that I am telling the truth, and do next.
There's also additional information at the bottom of that if you wanted to read more in depth on the terms and conditions, which I always do, especially, I don't know, maybe I'm just the skeptic in me.
And so what you would do is you review all this, make sure it's accurate, do what Chris just suggested, make sure you dot your I's and cross your T's, and you say, I'm not a robot. I'm not going to do this because I'd mess it up. And I'm going to click submit. And when I click submit in a second, like I did it for 4 companies I have, I click submit and it came right back to me very quickly. And it gave me a confirmation number, and now you're in the queue. I haven't heard a word. I'm not sure when I'm going to hear a word. I won't believe I'm actually going to get $10,000 in my bank until I actually see it. And it may be too late already. I honestly don't know. I would say for the effort that I just described there, get in the queue if you believe you qualify and you have the information you need. Having your books current through January 31st would be really helpful. And there you go. That's how you do the application for the EIDL.
How do they qualify how much money you can get? Is that based on tax returns or?
It's based on they're going to ask you for more information, lots of forms, and you're going to give them information similar to what a bank would do. And then you're going to go, I'm going to go ahead and kill out of this. I don't want to mess it up. So you go back over to your application, and you just fill in the information that you have, and then they're going to go through your numbers and say, well, this is the 6 months of cash flows that you have, and we'll make a loan to you for up to 6 months of your cash flows. And so let's say you're making $4,000 a month, then they're going to do 6 times that. So $25,000 is what your loan potentially could be. That'll be a 30-year AM, and they might. And if you get this $10,000, then the $10,000 is forgiven, and you only got to pay the difference. That's the way I understand it. I haven't gone through the actual next step to know if that's how it works. That's the way I'm reading the tea leaves.
Gotcha. And just to answer Christine's question real quick, we're unsure if they do it 3 days before or after completed or after you approved.
Oh, the way we've read it, Chris, is that as soon as you apply, you're supposed to get your $3,000 within 3 days. I'm not sure if it's business days or not, but I assume it is. But I'm 3 days into it, and I didn't get my money. So
same, yeah.
So we don't know.
I've been checking to audit them, but yeah, still unsure. They're way behind, yeah.
And That will not be it. They will absolutely provide our request way more information, but they had more applications for this, I think, in one day than they get as SBA applications in an entire year. That's what I read someplace. I don't know how accurate that is, but I don't know if, let's suffice it to say, they got a bunch of applications and they're hiring like crazy, and they're going to bring in all these people, and they're completely overwhelmed, and they're going to get to you when they can get to you. So this is a fluid situation, as we keep saying. All right. Yeah, Rocky saying he's the way behind. I'm sure they are.
Paul's over here got 4 inquiries so far.
No, I've got 4 applications, but no inquiries. That's for sure. All right. Any other questions about the idle and the idle? Let's talk about that for now. Yeah, and what Charlie says is they can only, or Charles Rose, they can only say yes or no. That's right. That's all I can say. I mean, get in line, get your ticket, and hopefully it's a lower number than until they run out of money. That's all I can say. But only apply if it is legitimate. Don't fill them up with with something that's a hope and a prayer. If you have,
and it's up to 10K. Yeah.
Right. Yes, Nino. 10 grand per LLC. Up to 10 grand. Yeah. Because I have one LLC that's really small and doesn't have this only has 2 properties. I would not be surprised if my normal loan with them wouldn't be over 10 grand anyway. So I probably wouldn't get the full 10 grand on that one, I'm guessing. So in this case, it actually would suit you to have more LLCs or more entities than it would be have one big one. But you can't like start a bunch of LLCs now. It has to be in place since January 31st. Okay. We'll come back to this topic at the end if we have some more open Q&A. Let's move on. Okay. So are y'all seeing the IRA and QRP?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. All right. So let's talk about how this affects your individual retirement accounts and your qualifying, your 401k basically. So you can now withdraw up to $100,000 for Corona related expenses or impact. And so this is for your IRA. You can take basically a withdrawal and not pay the 10% early withdrawal penalty. And if you return it back within 3 years, you're not paying taxes on it. That is treated as a rollover. And you can put it back into another IRA. It doesn't have to be into the same IRA. And there's kind of this question, well, could you take $100,000 out of, or up to $100,000 out of your Roth IRA and then put it back into your, take it out of your traditional IRA and roll it into your Roth IRA? And it doesn't say you can't do that, but I would be surprised if they're going to allow that to happen, because you could basically you can get tax advantages and do a rollover without ever having to pay the taxes on it. But there has not been any kind of a formal statement that comes out that says you can't do that. But I'd be surprised if they let that fly. But you also don't have to put it back in 3 years. You could just keep it, and it would be just a withdrawal, and you pay your taxes the way you'd pay your taxes on a normal withdrawal. Also, there are no required minimum distributions for any accounts in 2020. So I have a couple accounts that are inherited that have RMDs. Then I wouldn't have to pay RMDs on those. Or if you're over 70.5 or 72, depending on the situation, then you would have to normally pay or take required minimum distributions that it does not exist in 2020. So for your 401k, they've increased the loan limits to $100,000 or 100% of its value. So you can take a normal loan like you could normally, but now that instead of the limit being $50,000, the loan limit is now $100,000. and you'd have to pay it back as you normally would. Now, any loans that you're taking out, right? Any existing loans that you have right now, you don't have to pay them back until the end of the year. So you can delay payments for 1 year for loans that are due before December 31st, 2020. Any questions on that? Chat. Okay. Does this affect anybody? Or are y'all interested in this part at all? What exactly are they considering coronavirus expenses? So, Chris, there is a stipulation in that kind of defines what it is if you got the coronavirus, or you are taking care of somebody who had the coronavirus, or you are off work because of it, or you were just generally impacted by it. And you had some sort of impact as a result of the coronavirus. So it's really open-ended on the back end. I don't know if there's anybody who can say that they were not affected by this whatsoever. I mean, I guess there might be a case here or there, but it's pretty general on what would qualify you for being able to take that money out. But you don't have to you don't have to like say these were the expenses that I had. You just said I was affected, I'm going to pull it out. I don't know if there are forms. I think you would just, right now, there are no new forms that I've seen. I think you would just take your withdrawal as normal, because I mean, this exists in IRAs today. You can take a withdrawal for up to 6 months. It's like a interest-free loan to yourself, and then you can put it back and not have tax implications. I think they're just taking that same concept and extending it to 3 years. And depending on if you decide to actually put the money back, you have a choice. If you want to keep the money outside the IRA, do you pay the taxes at the end, or do you spread it out over 3 years? And so that'd be something to talk to your accountant about.
Now, what about if you have the rental under a self-directed IRA?
That's a good question. You have a self-directed IRA. Well, you were impacted by it as a result of that, weren't you? So I think you could take, if you had $50,000 in your IRA like that, you'd take the $50,000 out if you wish, and you treat it like you would in a stock market. But there are some implications there that I'd be careful about and think through that, because I have a lot of the same situations, Manuel. So what would you want to do with it? Would you take the money out? Because I don't think the asset or what's invested in would matters, whether it's rental property or a stock market. But if a tenant couldn't pay rent, you're affected. So you could have an unrelated IRA that has money, and you would be able to take $100,000 out, I think, or up to $100,000 out. Anybody else? I just don't know if people care about this or not, because it may not be relevant. Yeah, I think so, Manuel. Manuel. I'm sorry, no. Okay, let's move on. Talking about the mortgages and evictions and foreclosures. Oh my. Okay, so as a part of the CARES Act, there is a provision in there that provides for foreclosure relief for federally backed loans. So this means properties that are 1 to 4 family properties, in any way, if they were purchased, they're owned, insured, guaranteed by Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, VA, USDA. These provisions, those properties right now cannot be foreclosed on. Also, there's provision that says that a servicer of any of these cannot issue foreclosures. So you can't do a foreclosure judgment, you can't order the sale, you can't execute a foreclosure-related eviction. So sometimes you get a property and there's an eviction, or there's somebody in the property, you can't even evict the person if you bought a property that peeked through a foreclosure right now. So the last provision lasts for not less than 60 days, starting on March 18th. So from March 18th on to for 60 days, these evictions and foreclosures aren't allowed for federally backed loans on these type of properties. Furthermore, homeowners with federally backed mortgage loans affected by COVID-19 can request forbearance for mortgage payments for up to 180 days, and then even request an addition of another 180 days. So if you have an existing loan on your personal property, or if you bought any properties subject to the existing mortgage that are federally backed, you are eligible to request an extension or a forbearance of payments. So during that, while that happens, no fees, penalties, or interest would accrue other than what would normally have accrued if you had paid your payments as normal. So I think that's for people who do creative real estate, there's a huge potential there, because a lot of those loans that you buy sub to, or your own personal residence, these are all properties that are probably covered by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. In the links that I'm going to send you, there are 2 places you can go and check to see if your loans are backed by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac.
So I got a question, Paul. If you do take the property subject to, is it the home owner that has the mortgage that is going to be the one that has to apply to that?
They could,
Or
if you have a good relationship with them, then they could. My experience is I don't usually keep contact necessarily with the previous person that I'm paying make their payments for. Sometimes they move on and they're ready to go on with life, and they don't want to worry about that mortgage anymore. But it's still in their name. But remember, you have power of attorney on them, and you can request to do that. If you're going to do that and you can contact them, I would really recommend you contact them and tell them you're going to do that, because it shouldn't affect their credit, but it would still be nice to tell them.
Yeah, just open communication there. But it seems to me, since interest is not accruing, wouldn't you want to go ahead and apply for this, even if you don't need the help, just to kind of stack up some cash?
It's a reasonable point of view. I mean, and this is even for your own personal, like, you don't have to pay your own mortgage right now if you don't want to. If it's federally backed, you could just say, you know what, Bank of America or whoever, Wells Fargo or Chase or whoever you use, I'm requesting forbearance because I can, and you're still going to pay it back. I mean, it doesn't,
right.
It's just like a short-term cash flow play is what all it is. So it's kind of a personal call as to whether or not you'd want to do that or not. If you have the cash and you don't want to stress with the headache of doing that, then you can do so. I know I use Bank of America, and they have it built into their portal. I mean, it would take probably nothing more than a few minutes to apply. I mean, I don't know about the other banks, but that's what I have on my personal house. And there's a button on when I log in that says you can apply for it if you want to.
I mean, why not? Stack up some cash.
Yeah. And so somebody asked, how would you go about asking for this forbearance? He has 2 properties or sub 2. I would go to the bank that you're dealing with. If you can't get into the login yourself because you don't have access, then you have to call them, and you have to prove that you have power of attorney, which you probably need to have with a plus sub 2 anyway. And you would ask them what their process is. It's going to be on a per servicer, per bank method. And depending on how many sub 2s you have, you might be busy for a while, because you might be on the phone waiting for a lot of IVRs to come through. Okay. Any more questions about, well, I guess I haven't covered the evictions. Evictions are also not allowed on any property that is a dwelling that is covered by these federally backed loans. So it doesn't matter where you are. If it's backed by this, you're not supposed to be able to do an eviction. Furthermore, there are many states who have put in a moratorium on evictions. So there's kind of a order of, there's like a hierarchy here. I think, okay. So this is, facts are over. This is my opinion right now. I think if somebody can apply for unemployment and they can afford to make the rent payment, they should. If they don't, and you can't evict them right now, most likely, even if your state hasn't put down a moratorium, I doubt you'll get it through the court system anyway right now. So you have to keep track of that and tell people, you can make more money right now. You have the cash for it. You're about to get and I can tell you how much you're going to get for your stimulus package, a check. So it's not like these folks are not going to get any money in the next few weeks if they want it. I mean, yes, they have to go through the process, but if they can afford to make the payments, I think rent still do. If someone can't make their payment for legitimate reasons, they're an undocumented resident, they can't apply for any of this, they're not able to get enough work done to make their payments, that's when I would probably file for this forbearance for the bank loan that I have on that property, if I have a bank loan. This does not necessarily apply to every property, though. You may have commercial loans, and you need to talk to that local bank that's in your area and say, do you have a forbearance policy? Every bank that I've used here locally that I've talked to, and these are not federally backed loans, they're commercial loans, they've all told me that they do have a policy. So I'm waiting to see who is paying, who's not, and I'm going to adjust on a per property basis accordingly. Do they cap the interest rate on forbearance? The interest still accrues as though you made payments, but there's no additional cost associated with doing forbearance, according to, at least based on the federally backed loans. The commercial loans, it depends on the bank's policy.
Yeah, that's a big distinction to make.
Yeah.
Between commercial and federally backed.
Yeah, and if you probably know if you have commercial bank loan or not because it's different. You can get these federally backed type loans that are they're 30-year notes, and they feel like they're federally backed, but they may not be. So there are these two links that I'll send you for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, where you can put in your actual information, and they'll check to say yes, it is backed by Fannie Mae or not, or Freddie Mac or not. And then call the institution that you're working with and just say, I need some relief. Well, what are the choices? And right now, what I'm hearing is that people just across the board, everybody's affected by this. Anybody who can work with you, I've found is trying to, because they don't really have any choice. I mean, there's a lot of federal pressure. If not already existing law, there's a lot of federal and state local pressure to work with people on these things. And so far, the laws don't match up exactly as far as there being like a federal mandate that no federally backed loans can be foreclosed and evictions are not happening. But for anything that is federally backed, it does line up. It's the ones that are not federally backed where the laws somewhat don't match up. Because, for example, currently we're in Arkansas, we don't have an eviction moratorium officially, but I haven't heard of anybody who's actually been able to get one through because the courts aren't in session.
Yeah, I would just hate for a landlord to be in a position to have a tenant that knows the game and squats in there. We're going through that as
it's
well.
It's going to happen. And there's no doubt about that. It's going to happen. That's why you apply for these idle loans and these payroll protection plans to get you some cash. Float it while you can. And if you find somebody that's abusing it, when this thing all passes over, you can, after 30 days, you can give them the 30-day notice, and then you can deal with it however you want to do it. My policy is if someone tells me that they can't pay, I want to document why, and then I want to ask them to document what they're doing about it. Is there any reason why you can't apply for unemployment? How much are you getting for your check? Do you know how much you're getting from the stimulus? And if you're an undocumented person and you can't go and get unemployment, what are you doing? I might have some work for you. I mean, if you're not sick, then what can you do to take care of things? Provided that they practice appropriate social distancing and whatever the local laws are for your state. Make sure that you're not pushing people to do things that's not safe for them. But if they're unable to work because their job has shut down, there are other places who are hiring. So Domino's is hiring 20 or 10,000 new delivery drivers. That will not make up for everybody losing their job, but there are a lot of places who are hiring. There are grocery stores are hiring, and I know that.
Amazon.
I really heard that.
Yeah, they're hiring a lot.
And yikes, Christine said it best. Tenants can play the game right and kind of keep you in the loop there.
They sure can. I mean, if they know it. I mean, eviction is effectively off the table during this time. Foreclosures, I would say, are off the table. I'm in a situation where I have tenant or people who I've sold properties to on owner financing, and owner financing or a foreclosure on them is not it's not on the table. I don't think you'll be able to get foreclosures or evictions through for the next 2 or 3 months at least. Depending on the situation, cash for keys is always an option. I bet you got to pay more now for cash for keys, but I mean, I don't know. Is it better to have a property that's with somebody there who takes care of it, but they're not paying, versus an empty one right now? I'm not sure I know.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yep. That's a battle right there. I think that's case by case.
And cash for keys, you mean like offering them maybe a bonus of I'll pay you $200 if you can be up by Friday versus going through that process.
Yeah. Yeah. It depends on the situation. All right. Let's move on.
We've got a question from Curtis. When Q&A starts, can you speculate how long this will play out?
Yeah, Patty made a good point there. That if you have an empty property over like 30 or 60 days, then the insurance won't cover it.
Curtis is asking just how it plays out economically.
If I knew that, I'd probably be a really rich person here in a couple of months.
I always live by the concept of it's always going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
And I believe that we're not at that point where it's at its worst yet, but I do believe we're on our way.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lapse in time between, this funding program, and then by the time you actually receive the funding, we don't know when that's going to be. Although they keep telling us things, I'm not confident in a date that I'd receive some relief.
Is he talking about the social distancing stuff? He's talking about the world reserves. So I'm going to avoid speculating on that kind of stuff. That stuff can be super fun. I want to focus on what we can do for individual investors now. We'll have other conversations about that, Curtis, about the greater macroeconomic forces. I want to cover any kind of specific questions people have about their situation and what decisions they're having to make now. So someone said, I have a tenant moving out and finding it hard to find tenants. Does this come under idle? Yes, I think so, Abdul. Absolutely.
And as far as the mobile home parks goes, is really all speculation at this point. If you can still fundamentally buy the deal right, and even more so on the right end, then perhaps. But I don't think anybody in here has a definite answer, yes or no, to decide one way or another.
Yeah. So timing wise, we have no idea. However, if you invest on the fundamentals, and you're in the financial situation to comfortably weather any sort of these issues, then that makes sense. If you would have bought it before and you're getting it at a good price now, and there's cash flows there, and you can afford for the next 3 to 4 months to maybe only get half the payments in your mobile homes, and you're okay with that, then if you would have made the investment before, then yes, that's the way I would look at it.
Yeah. So just essentially you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, put it through a stress test, the mobile home park or the investment in general. What does that stress test look like if if half the people don't pay, and for how long. And then you can, go through that accordingly.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of a whole bunch of articles that I'm going to send you guys, and a whole bunch of like really specific tactical resources that I want to send to all y'all that I've kind of been collecting. I mean, it's all public stuff that's out there, but if you want to get that, you can text the word investor to the number 33777 on your phones. If you're not already on our list, and we have another 10 minutes or so on our schedule. Does anybody else have any active questions? Or is it so obvious that, probably everybody's out there doing their applications right now and no one's talking.
Christine is going at it today.
Yeah, I don't know, Chris. How much, the question is, what do you believe the average investor has in retained earnings? Curtis said that he just submitted his idol. Good for you. I don't know, Chris. I suspect we don't have as much as we should. Most of us. I bet we get too fast and loose with our cash, and we go out and buy the next property too soon, and don't have enough cash reserves. That would be my speculation, but I can't give specific numbers. Yeah, Rocky said, yeah, it's more about the cash reserves. If you have a single member LLC, you use your EIN to apply, because the EIN or your LLC should have EIN for tax reporting purposes.
Hey, I have something here as well. For the student loans, this may apply to a lot of their tenants. Do they have to go in there and do anything specifically, or is it just automatically?
No, the interest is zero automatically, but for each person who has student loans, they have to go to their federally backed student loans and apply for the forbearance through September 30th. It does not happen automatically.
Okay, and that's separate from your tenants, because I'm speaking as a landlord to the tenant. Is they can do this, they can do that, and
Yeah,
things.
give some people choices. Yeah, if you have student loans, you can forbear them. You have access to unemployment. There are here are the jobs out there that you can go and get and apply for. Absolutely. And depending on what kind of business they have, that they may be able to apply for an EIDL or what is I forget what the P stands for, the Paycheck Protection Program. Scott,
Chris, what is the stress test? You kind of brought it up earlier.
Oh, yes. The stress test is putting your property through, from a cash flow standpoint.
Your underwriting is what he meant.
Yeah. When you're underwriting a deal, and you're basically seeing like what are worst case scenarios look like, and can this property, or how long can this property survive at the stress test level. So depending on the occupancy or number, that's up to you to determine. 50% might be accurate in these times. And then even the single family home, just one single home, how long can you afford the note without anyone in it? What do those holding costs look like, and are you prepared for that? That's the kind of the stress test I would put it through.
And Scott has a interesting point here. If you have a solid financial base, would you go ahead and apply for the forbearance? And if you do have emergency funds backed by a HELOC, this is all opinion based right here. And in my opinion, I would set myself up, even if I didn't need it, just to be able to cast out 3 months of not paying, or however long you want to do it.
Because we're not sure how long it's going to last. So if you have anything to do to keep cash in your bank for now, with the reasonable approaches that the federal government has given access to, and you're going to pay it back anyway. It's not like you're not paying it. You're just waiting for 3 months.
Yeah. And I mean, I'd rather have it not need it than need it and not have it. Because I had this similar conversation earlier. We may be good right now, but if this may last 6-8 months, we don't know. I mean, things are changing every day, and it's pretty rapid. I think I heard they had amended the CARES Act already twice in the first 72 hours. that it was out. So things are changing all the time, and we don't know. But if you were to get it and you have a low interest payment or something like that, that's kind of your insurance, so to speak, on that money is, you're kind of tying it up if you need it. And I'd rather need it and not have it than, need it, have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So
Rocky asked a question a long time ago. I'm not sure we answered. He said, do you have to lose all your freelance work or just some of it? I have not seen anywhere that you have to quantify how much you've lost. If you've been impacted, you can apply for either the Paycheck Protection Program if you have W-2 income you're having to pay, or for the EIDL just for economic and problems. So some loss of income is okay.
And then Charles, 0% student loan. Not sure, you're going to have to check with them to see.
I haven't heard anything about that, Charles. I have no idea what the current framework for applying for new student loans are. Yeah, it's a good question. If you're in college right now, you're not sure if you're going to have classes the same way you're used to. I can't imagine what it's like applying for a new loan right now for the fall of 2020. I have no idea.
Yep. It's just so many things are changing so rapidly. It's one of those things you kind of.
Nobody really knows. I mean, it's just opinions at this point, but you got to take care of what you can and what you know to be the resources are out there, and utilize those.
Yeah, and to not panic too, because the panic only just creates worry, and for what? I mean, it may change and be all in our favor very quickly. It may change the other way, but we can't tell and we don't know. So yeah, doing what we can, best we can with what we got.
What are our other questions? Anybody? I made a mistake. I made a mistake about sending everybody off to the EIDL, and it was first come, first serve. That's what they're all doing right now. They're not listening to us anymore.
Do you think there would be a great investor market in a few months?
Yes, I do, Faisal. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, and to extend that, it's just sticking to your fundamentals, but even more so buying it even more deeply discounted than you normally would.
Totally. I agree. All right. Well, it's kind of slowing down here. We haven't got any questions. I'll give it 2 more minutes and we'll go ahead and adjourn at the scheduled time of 7:30. And you will be getting an email from me. I am going to not read about this stuff anymore tonight. I'm going to relax. And then tomorrow I will put this out on Facebook. And I will also load this video onto my YouTube channel, and I will send everybody an email who is subscribed with all the resources that I use to kind of gather this and kind of found the best places to go. It's probably 10 great resources that have been collected by other sources. You bet.
Awesome.
Faisal.
Yep. Happy to be here and share with you guys.
All right. Before we go, Chris or Cody, got any last words?
Just thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll just continue to hang in there and do the best we can with what we got.
You bet.
Last thing I want to say is just stick to the fundamentals and utilize the resources out there.
All right. Good luck, everybody.
See you guys.
See ya.